All right, so this is our Think Big session for the package stage. We have, over the past several weeks, just to catch everyone up, we've reviewed our series of epics that we're planning over the next 4 to 6 milestones. Those are in the document. We've talked about all of those, gotten feedback. The goal now for moving forward is to start to talk about and introduce new ideas that aren't necessarily come from those epics. And for today, actually, Nick, not to put you on the spotlight, but you sent over a document that had a bunch of ideas for how to improve the package registry and even open some issues. So I thought we could just use that main document that you opened as a launching point to maybe brainstorm some new ideas. But Ian, I think you had a couple of things on the agenda first. Did you want to call those out?
Yeah, so first thing was that this meeting actually got quite a bit of traction and attention. Quite a few people reached out about the survey data I presented last week. A lot of people I wasn't expecting asked to get access to the agenda in the doc. So I just wanted to share that I think it's kind of exciting that we're doing something that other people are interested in. So that's just one note. And the other one is for 12.5, for part of the creative process, I would like to try an asynchronous brainstorm. This is a 1-hour session that used to be a workshop that I would run before I would start a big design sprint or a big design effort, kind of getting everyone's ideas together. I want to do this in an asynchronous fashion, to do it the GitLab way, which I think Dan's going to be very happy about. So this is a kind of a trial run. It's designing the metadata, and that's not a very exciting UI challenge. So the focus is really, I'd like to see what it's like for us as a team to do this asynchronous workshop and see how we can brainstorm together and kind of foster that creativity. We have a huge group of our users are also on our team, so it seems kind of silly not to take advantage of that kind of setup. So I added an issue. I'm going to flesh out the details, but I just kind of wanted to see if anybody had any thoughts on that before Nick kind of shows us everything cool. Is this something you would be interested in doing?
Yeah, I think this is a really good idea, Ian. Thanks for adding that issue. Could you make sure you add that to the package team sync meeting as well, just to remind people to be thinking about it? I want to make sure that we're all sort of keeping it in mind. But I think it's a great idea. Thank you for putting that together.
You bet. That's it. So over to Nick.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Nick, I linked your doc here. Maybe you could give a little bit of background on how and why you created that, and then we can go through some of the UI screens that you generated.
Yeah, okay, no problem. So as of last week, we had a bit of a discussion about some ideas of what we thought the package registry could go in, and we came to agreement that we would just create issues for these and use this as the starting point to discuss ideas. So that's what I did. So I had a few ideas and I created some issues for them. So that's what these issues are, essentially. So they're now out there, so they're free for anyone to take and do what they want with them. You know, I'm not like possessive over these ideas or anything. So if you've got better ideas or want to use them for inspiration or have any comments, and just leave them on the issue, it's absolutely fine. The first one then was the idea that I think I vocalized in the last meeting, which is basically like I have this idea that we could streamline project creation from the packages page itself. So in my head, I feel that packages are quite detached from anything else on GitLab. It's like a dumping ground. It's like an FTP place. You just put some files on a server somewhere and that's it. And they don't really have any connection anywhere else in GitLab at this moment in time. Or at least not without like extreme effort. Like by default, they're just on their own kind of thing and live in a project or in a group, whatever it may be. So yeah, my thought process is that it would be great if all of these packages started as projects on GitLab, and that would allow like way tighter integration between a package and a package and a project. And when we were looking at Ian's survey data, there was a lot of data in there that is actually project type data that you still want to, or that users want to see at the package level. So right now we can't supply any of that data to these users because there's just no link there between a package and a project. So the idea then is to encourage users to create packages via GitLab itself. So by clicking this new package button in the UI that would exist in the UI, that would take you down a sort of a pathway to creating a project, which would use one of the other ideas that we've got floating around, which is the templates. So it would create a project of perhaps an npm package, but that npm package would be seeded with the template files for it to work inside either your project or group. So it would have the npm rc file, it would have a pre-filled out package JSON file. All of that kind of stuff could be done as just like almost a wizard type approach through the UI is what I was thinking there. So in the issue itself, I've got like screenshots of how this could work. So you could have a new package button, and then if you click the new package, that's sort of like you pick what package type you want to create. So you get a new npm package, Maven package, or Conan package, and then that would take you to the GitLab new project screen, which would be modified because you're now creating a project for a package, and that would be modified in the sense that it might be pre-filled based on what package, so what project or group you came from. Et cetera, whatever we can do there to sort of make the journey smooth for a user. The button as well would also have, it could be one of our dual buttons where we've got, so you've got a main action and then you've got a sub action, and the sub action could just be to download the package templates that we want to build and offer to our users. So that instead of like creating a project, that would basically just allow the user to download a zip file, and that would include all the files that the project would, but sort of you download this to disk and then you'd use whatever repository you wanted for hosting that package. So yeah, that was basically my thought process, and I'm thinking that if we can offer this to users, then that gives them a like it encourages them to host their package on GitLab itself and to host the projects on GitLab. And once we've got this connection between the two, we can then offer the additional things like issues inside package pages or MR, how many open MRs there are, like build status, and all these other pieces of metadata that our users are actually interested in seeing.
And then it would be easier to find, like you could have it when we add search, you could search for packaged projects, which might be easier too, because then we could have like a easier way to search for projects that are only packages, right?
Yeah, I don't see why not. We could do all kinds of things with this. Like we could highlight, I don't know, even in the UI, the package lists page, for example, we could highlight packages that are projects inside GitLab itself versus packages that are just packages on their own and perhaps hosted elsewhere. So yeah, there's loads of things that we could do here, I think.
One cool thing I just want to call out that I think this solves is I was actually talking to a user earlier today. He works at a very large enterprise company that's trying to move from from a monolith repo over to a new modern kind of microservices. And so his team, while his team may only make a new package once every few months, his company is generating new packages once a week and they're being created. So I think there's definitely a use case for our big clients that want to be able to jump in and create a new package and have it just set up to work automagically. So I've heard that this could be really useful for our users.
And this is kind of what a lot of people are doing now with NPM anyway, or Maven anyway, right? Like they're pulling from an NPM package that comes from maybe a GitHub or a GitLab project somewhere, right? So this isn't like a major change in their process.
No, not at all. I mean, like pretty much every package is going to have a repository somewhere, like a normal Git repository somewhere. In the case of NPM, all the packages are pretty much hosted on GitHub in terms of that. The actual project itself is hosted on GitHub, and then they just produce a build which goes to NPM. But you'll notice on things like NPM that they will have like number of issues and then direct links to the repository and all of that kind of stuff, which is obviously something that we're missing at this moment in time.
And a README would be nice. Things like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything stopping us from doing this? Is there any like technical challenges that we could see in implementing this? I mean, I think we still would want to validate it with users, but technically, are there any problems?
I don't think so. I think the thing that you'd have to establish is the link between a package and a repository, or a link between a package and a project. So that would have to exist somewhere. In the case of NPM, like in package.json, you can actually put your project URL in there. So I don't know about the other package registries, but that would be presumably, like if you've got a link between the two, then it's relatively easy to grab the data from one and display it on the other. So it's just having that link essentially. And then all the options around it, like perhaps if a user doesn't want to have their package linked to a project, like being able to destroy that link or change it or whatever.
Do you think that there is a big difference in kind of setting up these templates with the different package managers, or from kind of that UI wizard experience, do all of the package managers kind of follow a similar flow? I'm only really familiar with NPM, so I'm not sure if there's like a huge delta when you move over to Maven or Conan.
My gut feeling is no. I think most. So if you wanted to create a package for most languages, there is some kind of command that you would run. So like npm init, for example, would get you started off. I think what our templates are looking to solve is not necessarily for a package itself, but for a package to work on GitLab. So it would include all the additional or any additional files or settings that might need to be applied to a package for it to work on GitLab out of the box. Or at least that's what I think the templates are trying to solve.
One of the things that Sid has been pushing me on is to enable inner sourcing for companies. So like the example that Ian gave, where a large enterprise company, they are creating hundreds of packages a year, but they don't want to open source those, but they do want to host them. So it feels like this would be the best way to do that, especially if we can figure out how to maintain those links and make it really easy to navigate all of the different packages that exist at your organizational level. I like this idea a lot.
Should we move on to the next one? Okay, cool. I can't even remember what the next one was. Provide tools to help users manage dependency versions. Oh, okay, yeah. So this one, I think people have probably been talking about this elsewhere as well. So I think that, again, this was me just verbalizing. Writing down.
Nick, sorry to interrupt. You're referring to the second or third issue we have linked in the document?
The second one, provide tools to help users manage dependency versions.
Okay, thanks.
Right, yeah, I didn't see the title was duplicated.
Yeah, I'll take care of the document. Thanks, Nick. Sorry to interrupt.
So this one's another one that I've definitely brought up in the past, perhaps not spoken about. So this is something that GitLab itself suffers from, at least on the front end. So I noticed that one of our maintainers was talking about how they have to manually manage dependencies. So when a dependency version changes, they have to manually create a MR for that, update the dependency version, run all the tests against it, et cetera, and validate that this actually, we can upgrade without breaking stuff. Which is obviously quite a lot of work, especially in the JavaScript world where dependencies are changing quite often. And this is just a problem in general. Where I used to work, we had this problem all the time where dependencies would change, and it would take weeks sometimes if there was a big update for us to move across versions and stuff like that. So I think in continuous integration world, one of these things that I certainly remember being told about, but I don't think I've ever seen in practice, is that actually it's better or it can be better to just update. And if you're always updating as soon as a version is released, then that sort of forces you to fix any problems. But the plus side to that is that you're always going to be running the latest versions. You're always going to have the latest security updates, et cetera, et cetera. So there are pluses to that approach. And it occurred to me that this is something that could automatically happen inside GitLab itself, especially if you're using the internal, our package registry. So if you've got a project that's using the package from GitLab's package registry, then we're going to know when that package version updates. And I was thinking that we could build processes off of that, that the user could opt into to help them manage their dependencies. So if you imagine that you update a new version of a package, you upload a new version of a package, and then all the projects that package depends on gets an MR that updates their package JSON file to the new version. It kicks off a pipeline, does a build, runs all the tests, and if all of that is green, it just automatically merged that new version of the package in. That lifts a huge weight off of the developers' backs, and all they have to do then is just verify that everything's okay. And now I'm not going to say that every single project is going to want to work like that. In some instances, you are going to want to manually check and be really cautious about your dependencies. But for some projects, you don't. You just want the latest, or you want to just not have this extra work to deal with. And you might want to surround that with rules as well, which I think we could offer. So for example, perhaps don't automatically do a merge if you're going from a major version update. But if you're already going up incremental or minor versions because there's been a few bug fixes or security fixes or whatever, then I think most people are going to be okay with merging those kind of changes in, as long as like some kind of pipeline is green or there's been some kind of verification. And like I say, we could give the options to users to the point where actually it won't do an automatic merge. At the end, all the pipelines are green, but at the end it will assign it to somebody who would give it the once over, and then they would decide, they would act as like a point of responsibility, and then all they have to do is either press yes or no. So the idea behind this is to reduce like the amount of friction that these developers are going to feel for this particular scenario. And like I say, this is a problem that GitLab has itself on the front end, and there are people that sit and do this manually. And so if there's anything that we can do to help this, I think this is an area that we could look into and like bring real benefit to users.
So
Anyone?
yeah, I wanted to add on top of what Nick said. From my past experience, this is extremely true. Every time there is an update, there is friction. That is not just for the developers team, but sometimes you need to set in a time to do that update because you really need it, because of security. It's difficult to explain to your manager why you are setting away a week for producing nothing. So if we can smooth this out as much as possible, it will be great. And maybe we could go even as far as actually spinning us an instance of their product with the updated package and like to be testable with a pipeline or similarity, so that they can actually check it, everything is all right, and be more confident, even probably for majors. And for security related stuff, there is a tool that we may look, is called Dependency, and it's a bot that crawls your packages and generates PR, because this is on GitHub, with updates, and also keep them in sync. So maybe we can take a look at that. That's more primitive compared to what we want to do, but it can be an inspiration.
I think that particular bot is being floated about as an idea to solve it in GitLab for the GitLab code base. I don't know if it's that exact bot, there is a bot that is being floated as a way to solve this. So yeah, like if that seems like a suitable solution, then maybe that could be like an MVP style approach that we could take.
That bot would look at, say, NPM and know when an update was made, and then submit the MR in this example on GitLab? Or
I think so, although I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, it does.
Sorry.
That. It submits an MR so that all your pipeline can run, and you are the one that's going to click merge at the end.
that's awesome. And do we know when, like, I haven't seen when I update a package, anything show up in the activity feed. I was debating opening an issue for that in 12.5. Do we know, like, when we bump a version or create a new version of an NPM package, do we know when that happens? Would we have to add some triggers or webhooks or something like that?
I'm not sure, to be honest. Obviously, the backend knows that the event is happening because it handles all the uploading of the package and right into the database, etc., etc. What it does with that information, I don't know. Steve might have some insights there.
I'm not totally sure. Yeah, I don't know.
It doesn't seem like an impossible problem to solve. Like, even if we don't know now, it seems like something's happening. So we just need to then make sure we track it and then do something when we know it happens, right? Like, it's not an impossible problem to solve.
No, I personally don't feel it's like impossible. I think there's some considerations to it though. Like, for example, scanning every dependency for every project on GitLab is going to be quite the undertaking, like scalability, that's kind of a problem. But you could like an MVP could just work on the packages inside the GitLab package registry, and then we don't check packages that are outsourced or say stored from other packages. So we wouldn't be crawling NPM checking for updates if a package is updated on new versions being released on NPM, for example. that's probably a significantly harder problem than just doing the GitLab internal version for now.
And actually, that's a maybe enticing for people to start hosting their packages on GitLab instead of pulling them from some other server, right?
Oh yeah, you could market that for sure.
Yeah.
But, I mean, is that go ahead, William.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in to say, I believe the secure team has been working on this type of flow where they scan different dependencies and auto-generate the MR. And I'm just curious if the discussion right now is talking about hooking into their flow or perhaps developing a separate one.
I think we haven't decided that yet. Right now, we're just the idea of saying, like, the problem is for developers is that they have this need to update dependencies when they come in, and we'd like to do that, but we haven't come up with a solution yet. I am talking to Nicole on the secure team this morning. I could find out a little bit more about what they're working on and see if we could tie into that at all.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, it sounds like an awesome concept.
Yeah, and I think with the sort of idea of hooking in with what Secure is doing has already kind of come up with regard to the dependency firewall category that we've been sort of considering. So I think this is a good question to be asking right now. And as Tim mentioned, he's already chatting with Nicole about it. So yeah, might be an opportunity to answer some of these questions from people's experience that they've already implemented. So good idea. Thanks, William.
Cool. That's all. And yeah, there's some UI considerations to figure out, like, do you opt into it? Do you opt out? Maybe there's some consideration for protected branches or things like that we may treat differently. But I also like this idea a lot. Should we hop to the next one?
Hop to the next one. Okay, so the next one is. So yeah, help users identify the correct version of the package to use. So this was just, like, I don't really have any solid ideas here. This was just a few points. But I noticed that in the survey, like, one of the reasons why they use the UI is to see which version of the package they should be using in their local environment. So I figured that's probably quite a common scenario. And there's probably a bunch of things that we could do to facilitate that and help make that a bit easier. So one of those is, so on project creation, we could check if the user creating a project or the group that the project is being created within is hosting any packages, and then we could, like, have some kind of prompt to the user to say, do you want to include any of these packages as part of your project setup? So yeah, there are some considerations with that. This is a bit of a pie in the sky kind of idea. But yeah, like, we could say, look, do you want to auto add these packages now? And then that would generate, like, the appropriate package JSON or whatever it might be file as part of your project setup. And then just a few other sort of ideas. On the packages list inside a group or project, we could have a button next to each package which says add to project. That would open up some kind of dialog where you could select a project, and that package would then automatically get added to that project. And that might include, like, an MR that would update, again, package JSON, and it might include highlighting or providing files for the user to download to set their system up so that they can pull from GitLab as opposed to pulling from somewhere like NPM. We could add a button somewhere inside the projects pages itself. So basically the reverse, where you could add a package or select, say you wanted to add a package to this project, and then you could browse and navigate to a package to add. So basically just some UI elements on both sides of the equation to be able to easily add packages to a project. And we could have something like use latest version or something like that as the button. So if you imagine these are dialogues and you could select which version of the package or project you want to add, you can basically just select latest version. So the user doesn't have to worry about looking up a particular version. Yeah, and then the final idea, which is, again, like, on the packages list page, highlight newer releases in some manner. So, for example, right now we do list out all the releases for a package as a single sort of row in the table, which could get lost. And yeah, if that table grows large, like you might not know which one is the latest one. For example, you're trusting, you might be just looking at the created date. And if the latest version was 2 weeks ago, then you don't really know if that's the latest version or not. Now we are adding sort to that page, but we could have like another feed or something at the top outside of the table that basically says such and such package was released, or such and such package is the latest day, or just some kind of feed closer to the top of the page, like of recent activity inside this package registry.
And what about labels? It seems odd to me that we don't allow users to add labels to packages now. Like we're talking about supporting NPM tags, but in terms of GitLab labels, we don't really allow any of that. That might be a nice UI element too, right?
Yeah, I think that could be useful. I think it raises some like additional features. So if you just enabled labels, for example, and say you were using labels to denote which one is the latest version, which is something that the npm tags do, then yeah, we would, like, for example, if the user then updated a package, it would rely on the user to then go and move the latest label around, or potentially would, depending on how it was implemented. So I think we'd have to be like quite strict on the definition of what a label is and how it potentially differs from a tag. Potentially. But in theory, I do like the idea, because I do like the idea of being able to keep groups and things like that out of labels. So if you imagine you had a suite of packages, and some of these packages applied to, I don't know, a chat application. So you labeled all of those packages as chat. You could then click on your chat label and see all the packages that are related to chat, or something like that. I think that's quite a nice feature to sort and organize your packages.
But, sorry, Tim, I think you want to continue a thought here, so I guess I'll let you go first. Sorry.
Thanks. Maybe the differentiator is like tags are auto-generated and denote the status of like its latest or stable or something like that, and labels are used to categorize like what area of the code they represent or something like that.
We could use label even cross package manager. So for example, Nick idea about chat, you could target chat, the JavaScript module and the Conan piece of server, or the Python or the gem bundle that take care of the chat. So you can actually have an overview of the full structure.
And the thing I was going to question here is why we're not using, like insofar as integrating with GitLab and the way that GitLab works, why would we not just surface those tags as labels anyway? Because then people can use it just as they would. So maybe a workflow here that would be useful to describe what I'm thinking here is, as a user, I would come to GitLab, say I'm on my phone, and then I actually went to GitLab and looked at my list of packages, and I see there's let's just say a tag right now. How do I interact with that tag? How do I actually do anything right now with it? If we actually surface, and obviously there's a bunch of like technical considerations here, if we actually surface those tags as labels anyway, it means that the user could actually, for example, maybe a workflow would be the latest label is applied. And I think that one should be applied automatically, but just for argument's sake, let's say it isn't. But if the tag is latest, because that's actually a tag, maybe you could do tag : latest or something like that. That would be a concept that would apply across most of the package managers. And if, as a user, I could see a cool scenario in the future where the user goes and removes that label from a package, and then that sort of triggers a rebuild, maybe, or something like that. Now, I'm not saying that is a workflow that users might want to use, but it's that idea of like, hey, why don't we surface this as GitLab native concepts rather than adding a whole separate thing that's going to be managed only from the command line at that point, right? Is anyone else taking notes, or am I just talking too fast?
I can see that. I'm thinking of that, and yeah, tags and labels are essentially the same thing. They're just a way of applying some kind of tag or label to a piece of data. So yeah, I kind of agree with that. That we could just they could all just be bundled together as one particular thing, and then the command line is just a way of applying those as well. I don't see why not.
Yeah, I think that would be. I'm trying to regularly call out that we're trying to integrate what we're doing, and Ian, not to step ahead of any of your research, I think, which is a really important point here. But I think that concept is like, hey, we have these labels, we have latest, we have versions that are actually associated, right? So shouldn't those things be surfaced into our GitLab labels if possible? Now, that would make it sort of a first party experience, and means I could log into GitLab on my phone and look at a package repo, because that's the other concept we have here, right, of linking the two. Not necessarily, but we could. And then just as I'm actually doing a build here, it pushes it up, and we can run a process that actually says, okay, this is version 2.3.1. I'm going to label it with that, so it's actually first party. And then further integration would be, as I remove that label, what does that do? And can I? So there's questions like that I think are interesting. And it could really speed up people's processes and also make it like a first party experience inside GitLab.
Sorry, anything else on that, Dan? Sorry, I was going to ask about the adding. Oops, where is it? So I lost it just now. Oh no. But adding, like having a button where you could add a package, adding a button to the group package view to say add it to my project, or vice versa, having a button in the package. Can we actually do that? Are there, like for Maven, some files live on my local machine, and is that this, like my npm-rc file lives on my local machine? Would we have to change anything in order to make that process? I really like that idea, and I think with creating these group level views, that would be really valuable. But is it possible? Is it feasible? Not to be that guy asking that question, but
well, they need to live on your local machine, but they actually need to live in the repository that is consuming the package. So we can probably make that happen in a semi-automatic way or automatic way, or certainly on project creation. If you say this project depends on this project that generates this package, or on this package, we can actually add, for example, the npm-rc or cononconfig.txt.
I thought one reason we didn't do that is because a lot of times those files include like personal access tokens or OAuth tokens or something like that, and putting that into code, into the repository, might be problematic, but maybe we can come up with a way around that.
So what I used to use in this case is like npm-rc.template that then you can copy to your npm-rc, and it's never sent back to the repository anymore.
So in my head, there was two parts to this particular feature. The first part would be, so if you're clicking the button in the UI to sort of say, add this package to my project, really all that would do is that would create an MR for that project, which would modify the package JSON file or whatever file to include that package and that version. Yeah. So that's all that the UI would do. But it would rely on whoever is building that that project to have the appropriate files in place to be able to pull from the GitLab package registry. So if that's a local user, then they might need, I don't know, in the case of NPM, the npm-rc file on their system to be able to pull from GitLab package. And if they haven't set that up previously, say this is the first package from within GitLab that they want to add to their project, then yes, they're going to have to go through some kind of setup process to be able to set that file, set their tokens, et cetera, to be able to pull that. So as part of this UI, we could have like links to the documentation, or even, like say, to those template files that we keep coming back to, where you could just download a copy of the npm-rc to put into your project. And then that would give them the start, basically. Would guide them along their journey to be able to make that the case. In the case where the project has already been doing that, then they wouldn't need that second part. They don't need to do that second part once, essentially.
Sorry, a way to think about that as well is, like, ideally, in my head, again, I have my own little like planet I'm living on, so like I'm not saying this is like necessarily the first step, but ideally the user doesn't have to be involved at all. and that, you know, we have a pipeline that then goes and builds the thing that we changed. And so then that npmrc or you know, whatever sort of build related configuration file gets generated, auto DevOps kicks off, we get a pipeline running, it gets executed, the user never has to be on a computer to make that happen. That's what I'm like. I brought this idea up a couple of times, but that's where I'd like to go. I think this is a great first step. I'm not suggesting needs to do something different, but I don't think we should be too locked into the idea that someone's going to be running, you know, npm build or whatever like build command that's going to generate or validate those configuration files, and that actually will be running them at some point. So I think that's maybe version 2 or 3 or something like that. Once we sort of figure out that that's valuable, I think it will be, but that'd be my sort of main call out from it.
Yeah, so there's 2 parts to that, isn't there? So there's the part where I guess what I was getting at is that the user itself, if they need to develop the project to be able to run it locally, et cetera, they're going to need the appropriate files on their system to be able to pull from the GitLab package registry. But what Dan's saying there is that if the project has already got a pipeline, it's got a whole build process associated with it, that installing this package from the UI should also be able to update that pipeline so that it is set up to automatically pull from the GitLab package registry if it wasn't already. So that is like, yeah, that's a really awesome thing that we should definitely be doing. Whether or not we can do that at the same time, probably not. But yeah, I think that's where we should be looking to get ultimately, is to have it so that the user, like, we make the journey as painless for the user as possible.
So from the point of view of helping user identify the correct version, now we are just thinking about latest or latest update. Sometimes it happens that you need to lock yourself on a precise version, because after that they add a bug, before that you don't have the feature that you need. And I think it will be helpful if we manage to, sometimes it ends up that you're writing an issue and say, concluding this issue, this is blocked until library XY or package XY is updated, because this is the issue on their side. I think it will be super cool to be able to link the package on the other repository to the issue and say, hey, you know, the package, the issue that is, this issue is not blocked anymore because package XYY is now released and you can consume it this way, and we trigger this pipeline to have your test. And this can move on. I had this problem a lot of time in my work experience, and something small that takes a lot of time because you need to cross-check. Maybe the code is merged, maybe the PR is merged, but the release, you just missed the release window, so it's gonna go in 3 weeks, and then you forget about it. And this is the stuff that should go on its own.
That's a great idea, Nico. Good call out. I think that is lined up pretty well with the security, the way the security flow works, right? Where we have security consideration with a particular build of whatever it is. This doesn't mean a security, but that idea of like, hey, here's a list of things that you need to be aware of with regard to this build, and maybe that is referring to some blocking issue. Yeah, I like that. That's awesome. I don't know if I'm getting the notes down properly, Nico. Could you just scan that and make sure I'm recording them correctly? That's a great idea. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or Ian?
Nick, this was awesome. Thank you for putting all those issues together. A lot of what you're talking about resonates with what the research has been showing, especially the qualitative research. So I've been talking to users, and you are kind of spot on for addressing some of the issues and headaches. Definitely talking about like updating to the right version is something that comes up a lot. So good job. I'm excited.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that as an experiment, and just for people that are sort of following along at home, you know, being engaged and thinking about ways we can make our users' experience better is awesome. And I think a lot of people, as you work in not only as you're working in the code, but as you're sort of validating the solutions you're creating, if you see a pain point whilst you're doing that, call it out. Like, we don't always have the access to users that we might want to really validate or understand what struggles they're facing. But if you're doing it, and Conan, for example, Steve, right, where you're saying, this seems weird, but it's probably just me doing it wrong, which is probably what we're all doing. Maybe just call that out as an issue and saying, hey, in this process of me uploading, I found this to be kind of a pain point for me. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be as detailed and amazing as Nick's effort here with the document and everything that he's done, which is awesome. Nick, thank you so much for that. It can just be a simple issue, like we mentioned before, just call out the problem and a suggested solution, and then we can sort of flesh that process out. We can form the basis of some of these possible improvements. And so you just want to encourage everyone to put that together in whatever minimal form you can manage, and we could all work as a team to flesh that out and make it better.
Yeah, that's true. Even if you just write one sentence and put it in an issue, that's still helpful. And I'm always happy to add details and things like that and ping you with questions. But yeah, thank you, Dan, for mentioning that. We have this meeting again in 2 weeks from now. I'll try and talk to people, and Ian will do the same, I think, for adding some new topics for 2 weeks from now, and see what we could talk about. Maybe some front end stuff, or maybe some back end stuff, or something entirely new. But yeah, this was great. Thank you for putting all that together and going through all this. Is really helpful. I can't wait to rewatch this video.
And can everyone hang around briefly after we start recording, please?
Okay.